Boom. All right, so we got some tri-tip going on. As you can see, it's untrimmed. We're gonna have to trim it. In this case, we gotta figure out what tools we're gonna use. Let's go over to our tool bag. It's a little light today. What do we pick? Fillet or boning? Good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome back to my channel, JPM.Cuisine. I'm JP. Today we're going to be taking a look at some knives. Not just any knives, we're looking at some trimming, fillet, or boning knives. The two that I have here are the Mercer Renaissance. This is a 7-inch fillet knife. As you can see, it's got that nice little flex in it. And then we've got a stiff boning knife. Now, when do I use which? You know, this is, sometimes you'll see a fillet knife that looks a little bit more like this and have that curvature, but fillet knives typically will have the flex in it. Okay, the boning knives typically are stiff, but with the magic of the internet, Mercer also has a 6-inch boning flexible. Now let me show you guys how I open up my Mercer knives. So I run a slit right across there. This is a free pro tip. Little stretch here. Pull this little flap here till you get that little spread, and then once you get it to spread out a bit, pull your knife out. None of that trimming, cutting, all that. That's probably worth the price of admission right there. And here we have the flexible 6-inch boning knife, okay? Double check, and here is the flexible 7-inch fillet knife. And here is the stiff boning knife. Okay, what do you use? Well, if you're cutting specifically fish, I think a 7-inch fillet knife is going to be perfect for that. You can get it straight. You can get right up in there with the skin and the scales and the fish, or in the bones, and you can get a nice cut out of there. You can try and use this, but you don't really have as much surface area on the blade. So this right here is probably better for trimming, whereas this one is best for removing from the bones. So what am I going to use for tri-tip? Well, I'm probably not going to use my stiff boning knife. I'd probably go towards a flexible boning knife or a fillet knife that I can get my cuts in. As you see, I always test it. That's how I always check to see which one I have in my hand specifically when I have a boning knife. Is if I can get that flex in it without having to push too hard, I know I've got the flexible boning knife because they both exist. With a fillet knife, I just like to bend it and hear that little saw action. It just kind of makes my day. So, let's talk about these knives a little bit. We've got the 50CR MOV 15, all NSF certified, all with the Mercer Delrin 3-rivet handles, the bolsters, and this one, the balance is, this is handle heavy. This is handle heavy as well, and this is handle heavy. So let's go ahead and see how they perform on my tri-tip. Also, you may have heard this one referred to as a fillet or a fillet knife. Depends on where you're from, where you come from. That's what you'll mostly hear. All right, so I've got some tri-tip. It's untrimmed. This one, I think it's what, $3.98 a pound. We're actually gonna have this for dinner, so I don't want to mess it up, but we'll just cut into it. And when they say untrimmed, it means it has the fat cap on the back mostly. The side that they sell you on is this. As you can see, the little marbling and the fat within. There's not a lot of trimming that you have to do on this side. You do want to, you know, if you've got a lot of excess silver skin, you may want to remove that. This little membrane that makes it tough. It'll cook out in cooking, so, or not necessarily cook out, but it won't become that much of an issue when it's that thin in cooking. Now here is where you have to do primarily a lot of your trimming. And for the most part, as you can see, you can kind of separate it with your finger. So you can get under that cap and you can kind of pull it away. And this is where maybe a flexible or stiff, doesn't matter as much. You get your cuts in, but you're basically just following along. You can use your hand for the most part. The problem is when you get to areas where it's really tough, you can end up ripping the meat off. So that's why you want to use a nice, very sharp knife. Sometimes you can even use like a deba. And you just want to drag along you don't want to sort of pierce into the meat. You can, you see as you got this silver skin, we'll deal with that in step 2. But let's go to the fillet. Fillet has the same sort of action. Okay, very sharp, nice little flicks. I'm sitting down, I can't see right here very well. Cut through, and you just basically, for the most part, as I've learned in my experience, you want to use the knife as little as possible, because you want to refrain from digging in and cutting into your meat too much. So you're just using the knife to sort of hold the meat, and you're really using your hands to get in there and get those cuts down. And you're just cutting, or scoring rather, where it doesn't want to give. So as you get closer to this. So as you move, you don't have to necessarily get it all in one piece, but for me it's easier if I go ahead and trim my my meat. This works well with brisket as well, towards the parts that eventually I can't cut out, okay? Or I can't pull out, I mean. Okay, so we're just gonna pull here. Going a little bit faster than I normally do. I have to wash 3 knives now. All for you guys, no problem. All right, so we're just trimming along here. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out. Now, what do you guys do with this? Sometimes I render it down for tallow. Depends, I just throw it in the Instant Pot for like maybe 15-20 minutes and then let it do its thing. And then I'll have like a nice bit of tallow that I have to strain out. Little extra use. What do you use the tallow for? For me, I typically will use it for seasoning, and then I also fry in it. So I'll add it to my oil and I'll fry in it, okay? So now we've gotten to the point where this right here is a little bit too hard to pull with your hand, okay? It's got a big fat. This is typically similar to a decal in the brisket, if you're familiar with that. And for me, that's a stiff. I'll grab that flex. This is where having that nice small tip will allow you to sort of get in and under the meat or under the fat, and then you can start to trim away, okay? Now, this is my favorite part of this trimming here, is where you get to see sort of these weird kind of puncture marks from, I don't know what it is, but if that grosses you out, maybe I need to put a graphic sign on this video. Is this a 3-Minute Thursday? I can't remember. I think it is a 3-Minute Thursday, so bear with me, okay? This fat right here is definitely, I think, a lot tastier, but it is very, very tough. I think for the most part you can use it for flavoring. You can cook it down. I've gone through and taste, especially with meats like these, I'll taste them and see which I prefer. That way I can sort of get a taste. I'll just basically do a quick fry on some of them in a pan with some butter, just to see sort of how they taste, how they feel texture wise, and then I can determine whether or not I think it's edible or I think it's serving worthy. Kind of depends. Just trimming out here, maybe a little bit too much. It's up to you. Don't flick it. Not in the studio. Okay. So, depending on how fast you go or how slow you go. For these, if you don't want to spend your time getting the membrane, you can always do some scoring following the grain. Okay. Very sharp knife. It's just gonna break them up a bit so that you don't have to worry about getting a sort of like a rubber band in your bite. Okay. So we're just gonna go in there. I like to do this towards myself. When you're doing this at your house, get wherever you are that's most comfortable. You mostly be standing up, and then you can get to it. Okay. Now you're the one who paid for the meat, so you're the one who's in charge of how much you decide to save or how much you decide to waste. It's all you, depending on what you want. Some of these things right here, they're gonna cook out, you're not gonna see, but since I'm here trimming, I can go ahead and remove them. And for the most part, this meat again has a lot of fat running through it, so don't worry about losing too much of your flavor from trimming. Again, if you want to do an experiment, you can cut off some extra meat with the pieces of fat and throw these in the frying pan and see sort of what you think they taste like. I mean, that's the only way that you're really gonna know what's a good cut, what's a good piece, you know, what's edible, what's not, is by trying it out. Okay, yeah, you can go to a butcher and they'll tell you, but you may not know why. And for me, first-hand experience is usually the best. So if you're getting to a point where you can actually trim your own meats, you can give them a taste and see what you like. If you're going towards competition cooking, I definitely recommend knowing what all the pieces taste like. So when you cook them, even though you're not cooking them sort of in that same method, you can try that as well. That way you get as close to authentic of your cooking style, and then you know which ones, which method or which area of meat you like to eat. You know, what you can tolerate and what you think is inedible. With these, the silver skin, sometimes it's nice to take your knife, that's a little bit deep, but we just pull it in, and then when I'm doing filet specifically, I like to pull this and cut out that silver skin, pulling it towards, okay? Sometimes, yeah, you kind of feel like you're wasting meat. Just don't butcher into it so that you're not getting, so that you end up with these weird sort of cutoffs, like weird kind of shapes and stuff. But you can trim as much or as little as you want. Now, the thing to notice about the tri-tip, most of the time the strands are going in the same direction as you see here, right? And then as we get to this point, we sort of see this is where the tri-tip wants to start to separate. So you get this big piece of muscle with the strands going sort of this way. If we put them like that, then yeah, it feels like it's the same. What happens is most of the time you cook it like this, and then when you start slicing, if you're slicing here, then you start slicing with the grain here. So most people will remove it here after they get done cooking it, and then they'll end up slicing against the grain here to get to that nice tender cut there. With this one, of course, you've got a much wider area, so you're gonna be trimming against the grain here. Very different, okay? So that's where you got sort of that tri-point, tri-tip there. For me, this is really good. This is pretty much as far as I'll go. Again, if there's spots where I don't feel like, you know, sort of trimming away the skin, I'll just cut into it, do a little score. It's up to you. I haven't run into any issues where, I mean, that right there, you can probably remove, be okay. Maybe you can clean off a little bit more fat, but it's up to you. You may run the risk of trimming too much meat away. This is gonna cook out perfectly, especially for how I'm gonna do it on the grill. All right, well, here's been a quick look at tri-tip trimming and a quick look at these 3 knives. But, all right, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. But again, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.